Namaste everybody. Advanced Vijayadashmi greetings and Navratri greetings to all of you. Welcome to the ninth video in the overall series and introduction to Sanatana Dharma. This is the seventh and last video in the sub-series Books and Prophets of Hinduism. By the way, what you see as the virtual background in the video is the Chennakeshava temple at Belur in Karnataka. If you've not been to this place, whenever possible, please do visit. The architecture is mind-blowing. So let's get started with today's video. Today, let us touch upon Veda Vyasa. First of all, why is he known as Veda Vyasa? The term Vyasa can mean Vyapti or spreading. Initially, the Veda was one body. There were no multiple Vedas. So to make the Vedic knowledge more accessible to humankind, Veda Vyasa broke the single Veda into four parts and spread it in the human world. For this reason, he is known as Veda Vyasa. By the way, as you may already be aware, Veda Vyasa is associated not just with the Vedas, but also with the Puranas. Uh, he's said to be the author of all the Puranas. Then the Brahma Sutras, which are sentences or sutras which talk about the supreme principle Parabrahma. Then, if you remember in an earlier video, we spoke about something called the Smriti body of literature. So there is a Vyasa Smriti, which probably can be classified under the Smriti category itself. Also, there is a saying in Sanskrit called Vyasochishtam Jagat Sarvam. Vyasa Uchishtam Jagat Sarvam. Uchishtam can typically mean something which has come out of the mouth typically. So Indians have this concept. Telugu it is called Engili, Hindi it is called Jhootha, right? This concept doesn't exist outside India as far as I am aware. You can eat in anybody's plate. Nothing to do with say the so-called caste or varna or religion. It is simply that I will not eat or drink using a vessel that is used by somebody else. So Uchishtam can actually mean that. However, in essence, what this means is the knowledge that we have in the world today or the world itself is a gift or has come out of Veda Vyasa. Why is that? Obviously, Vedas are the essence of knowledge in this world, for that matter, in creation, and they are available to us because of Veda Vyasa. And also, as you can see, there are other works that are attributed to him. Because of these reasons, Veda Vyasa's birthday, which is Ashadha Shuddha Purnima, the full moon day of the lunar calendar month Ashadha, is celebrated as Guru Purnima. It's his birthday, and for these reasons, it is celebrated as Guru Purnima. Now, there's an interesting backstory for Veda Vyasa. As I said, Veda Vyasa is actually a title. He who has undertaken the Vyasa or the Vyapti of the Veda. Now, there was a person called Apantaratama. First of all, the name itself is pretty interesting. Antaratama basically means inner darkness, avidya, ignorance, maya, darkness, whatever you wish to call it. Apantaratama basically means somebody who has overcome that internal ignorance or the darkness within us. Darkness, as I said, avidya, ignorance, all these things. So Vishnu created this person called Apantaratama, to assist Brahma in his work. Now, Apantaratama was the first person who divided the single Veda into four parts, into multiple parts. Vishnu was very pleased and told him that you will be born every Manvantara as a Veda Vyasa and do whatever work you have done right now and please me. Now, by the way, Manvantara, if you may remember, is a Hindu concept of time, which we will talk about later. The Vishnu Purana, interestingly, oh, by the way, so the latest or the last Veda Vyasa we have had was Krishna Dvaipayana. We'll talk about him a little later in the next slide. On top of that, the Vishnu Purana, so I found this on Wikipedia, the Vishnu Purana says that there have been 28 Vyasas in this particular Manvantara. So Veda Vyasa is a title given to a particular person based on the work that he has done. However, it is Mr. Apantaratama. So the sage Apantaratama, who's reborn every time as Veda Vyasa. Now, everybody knows that Veda Vyasa is the author, or more technically speaking, is the narrator of the Mahabharata. Ganapati had written it down. What may be known to a little maybe slightly fewer people, is that he plays a very, very, very critical role in the Mahabharata. So he's not just a narrator or the author, but he is an integral part of the story itself. How? Now let's look at this. Vedavyasa, or Krishna Dvaipayana, as we mentioned a little while back, was born to the sage Parashara and Satyavati. Now, the lady Satyavati has multiple names: Matsya Gandhi, Yojana Gandhi, Satyavati, all refer to the same person. So, Vedavyasa, or Krishna Dvaipayana, was born to the sage Parashara and Satyavati. When he was born, he was extremely dark. Krishna Varna obviously means dark or black, and he was born on an island or Dvipa. Because of this reason, he was named Krishna Dvaipayana. As soon as he was born, he actually attained adulthood immediately, saluted his mother, and went about doing his task of the work on the Vedas, Puranas, so on and so forth. Now, after some time, in the Kuruvamsha, in the Chandravamsha, Kuruvamsha, there was an impasse. There was no male heir left. So at this point of time, Satyavati was the widow of Shantanu Chakravarti. Shantanu had three sons. Bhishma was the Devavrata, or Bhishma was the first. He had taken a vow of celibacy, so he could not have heirs. Then Satyavati had two sons through Shantanu. One was Chitrangada and Vichitravirya. Both died without progeny. So the family was about to come to an end. At that point of time, Satyavati called her first son, Vedavyasa, and said, these are the widows of Vichitravirya, Ambika and Ambalika. They need to have children so that the line will continue. First of all, please keep one thing in mind. This practice where, say, a learned Brahman or a learned person who's in control of his senses being utilized to continue the family line is not allowed in the Kali Yuga, for simple reason that we don't have control over our senses now. So this was an acceptable practice at that point of time. Dharma Shastras, Dharma, there are certain points of Dharma which keep changing depending on the time, depending on the Yuga and all. So now there were the widows of Chitravirya, Ambika and Ambalika. Now Vedavyasa was, so by our modern standards, right? Vedavyasa was not the epitome of beauty. He was a rishi. He is a rishi. He doesn't care about our standards of beauty. Now he was dark, obviously, as we discussed. Because of his penance, he had red hair, obviously locks, long hair. He is a rishi. Now, when he approached Ambika, she kind of closed her eyes, fright, disgust, whatever it is. She closed her eyes tightly. Because of this, the son born to her, Dhritarashtra, was born blind. When he approached Ambalika, she went pale with fright. Because of this, the son born to her was born extremely pale, Panduvarna, in the color of Pandu, or extreme white. So Satyavati said, okay, the two children have been born, but the first one was born blind and the second one is extremely pale. So she sent Ambika again. This time what Ambika did was she sent a servant maid or a dasi in her place, and she was very devoted to Vyasa. Because of this, Dharma Devata, Yamadharma Raja, was born as Vidura. There is a backstory where he had a curse because of a rishi and all. But he was born, the wise Vidura was born to the servant maid. That way, Vedavyasa was responsible for the family tree to continue at that point of time. This is the one of the most critical roles he plays in the Mahabharata. Obviously, Pandavas, Kauravas, or technically the Dhartarashtras, are his children, or his, let's say, what do we call, progeny, people, not direct progeny, obviously. Technically, they are his grandchildren, actually speaking. So the entire story of the Mahabharata, the war, he is a precursor. He's a critical precursor to the entire story. Not just this. In the Mahabharata, we find a narrator named Sanjaya who narrates the Mahabharata war to Dhritarashtra. He was the charioteer of Dhritarashtra. He was Vedavyasa's guru, Vedavyasa's disciple, and Vedavyasa had given him this boon that you will be able to remotely see and visualize and understand whatever is happening in the war, including what people are discussing secretly. Going forward, at various points in the stories, he protects the Pandavas. Vedavyasa protects the Pandavas. He gives them advice. He counsels Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra at multiple places that what Duryodhana is doing is not good. Please cease whatever you are doing so that there is no kulakshaya, or destruction of the family. Obviously, everything fell on deaf ears. also. Draupadi obviously is a very critical part of the Mahabharata. There is a point where Arjuna won her hand in an archery contest, and the five brothers bring her to the house. Now, without seeing what they brought, Kunti, as was her habit, told them to share whatever they had brought. Now, a single woman marrying five men was not common even at that point of time. So the entire family was in a quandary. The Kunti primarily was in a quandary. So were Draupadi's parents. At that point of time, Vedavyasa actually narrates certain stories about Draupadi's and the Pandavas' earlier births and convinces the family members present there that this was acceptable in her case. Okay? He gives certain examples, he gives a certain narration and convinces them that this was acceptable. The reason I mentioned this is that obviously Draupadi is a critical character in the Mahabharata. So this is another example of the critical role that Vedavyasa played in the Mahabharata. Further, at a point of time, obviously, when we look at the side of Duryodhana, there was Bhishma, there was Drona, there was Ashwatthama, Kripacharya, stalwarts, extremely powerful people in their own right. So the Pandavas had a doubt that, okay, we are in exile right now. When we go back, these guys will not give our wealth, kingdom back. What do we do? That point of time, Vedavyasa counseled the Pandavas to propitiate the gods, Indra, Varuna, Yama, Ishvara, so that their energy, their strength would increase, so that they could face all the aforementioned people in battle when it was necessary. So he initiated Yudhishthira, the eldest brother, into a vidya, into a secret science called Pratismriti. The details are not mentioned in the Mahabharata. Yudhishthira in turn initiated Arjuna. Arjuna went and performed penance. He tapasya. He propitiated Ishvara Shiva himself and earns a lot of mantras, missiles, energy, strength, so on and so forth. One small interesting point here. When there is an Upanayana or today, even when there is an Upanayana, the sacred thread ceremony, right? The Guru does not give the mantra directly to the brahmachari, to the person. He initiates, he tells that mantra to the father tells that to the brahmachari. So there is a Sanskrit saying called Jeshta Bhrata Pitru Samaha. The eldest brother is equivalent to the father. So possibly for that reason, Vedavyasa initiated Yudhishthira into Pratismriti, and Yudhishthira in turn initiated Arjuna, obviously because he was possibly the strongest warrior among the Pandavas into that particular Vidya, and Arjuna went and performed penance. So these are various ways by which Vedavyasa played a very, very critical role in the Mahabharata, going beyond just being the narrator or the author. Now, let us look at Vedavyasa in a slightly different manner also. Obviously, he compiled the four Vedas from the original single body. He had four disciples for this: Paila, Vaishampayana, Jaimini, and Sumanta. He taught each one of them one Veda. They in turn taught their disciples, and thus we have various shakhas, and that is how the Vedas spread in the world. All the Puranas, he taught a person named Suta Pauranika. Suta, by the way, was the son of a rishi himself. That rishi's name was Romaharshana. So Vedavyasa taught all the Puranas to Suta. Shuka was the son, or is the son of Vedavyasa. The details of Shuka will form a video separately in their own right. So I am planning to have a video on Shuka himself. However, these are the primary means. So these are the primary people by which Vyasa helped knowledge to spread further in the world. Now, in today's video, we covered Veda Vyasa till now. And in the earlier video, we looked at some rishis in the Ramayana. Veda Vyasa is one of the so-called prophets of Hinduism in a way. Now let us look at a few other rishis that are mentioned in the Mahabharata. The sage Durvasa, he's said to be an Amsha of Shiva himself, Rudra himself. He plays a very, very critical role in the Mahabharata. At the beginning of the story, he actually went to Kunti's house. She was not married at that point of time. She served him, took very good care of him. Pleased with her, he taught her a mantra which could actually get, or rather summon, a deity of the person's choice. Kunti, in her, let's say, innocence or mischief, she was a young lady at that point of time. looked at the sun. So she saw the sun and obviously called. This is a well-known story. So that is how Karna was born. And had Karna not been on the side of the Kauravas, the Dhartarashtras, the Mahabharata war probably would not have happened. Later on, Kunti uses the same mantra to beget the Pandavas, Yudhishthira, Arjuna, and Bhima and Arjuna. She also tells that mantra to Madri, the second wife of Pandu, so that because of which she gave birth to Nakula and Sahadeva. So Durvasa plays a very critical role in the birth of the Pandavas, and in the birth of Karna. So he plays a very critical role. We also see his story as part of the Akshay Patra, where Duryodhana sends him to the Pandavas in exile. Krishna comes, eats that grain of rice from the Akshay Patra. Everybody feels full. That's a story. So Durvasa is one Rishi that we see in the Mahabharatam. Then Nara and Narayana were two Rishis. So there's an interesting backstory I read some time back. I think it was very long, couple of maybe more than 10 years back, if I remember correctly. One story I heard about Nara and Narayana is that after the Nrsimhavatara, after Nrsimha comes, kills Hiranyakashipu. Now, obviously, this portion of Narasimha was a lion and this portion was a human being. So there is a story that the upper portion became the Rishi Narayana and the lower body became the Rishi Nara. This is one story I heard. I read some time back. I think this was in the Kshetra Purana, or the story of the place for Badrinath, if I remember correctly. Now, Nara and Narayana were two rishis, performed intense penance, tapasya. They were reborn as Arjuna and Krishna, respectively. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna was Bhagavan Narayana himself directly. However, they were basically Nara and Narayana reborn. So we have two more rishis here, Nara and Narayana. There is another rishi that we hear about called Lomasha. So we talked about the Pratismriti Vidya, right? After that, Arjuna went to perform penance. So after he propitiated Ishvara, Shiva, Indra took him to the Indraloka for certain things. He taught Arjuna a lot of things. Then Arjuna also helped Indra in some ways by, I think, killing some Rakshasas. At that point of time, Indra sent a rishi named Lomasha to the forest where the rest of the Pandavas and Draupadi were. Lomasha actually took the Pandavas on a pilgrimage to a lot of places in the Mahabharata. Then Parashurama, we discussed in the earlier video that he is present in the Mahabharata also. He was the guru of Bhishma. In fact, he fought Bhishma. We heard the names Ambika and Ambalika in a little while back, the widows of Vichitravirya and the mothers respectively of Dhritarashtra and Pandu. They had an elder sister named Amba, who was reborn as a Shikhandi to kill Bhishma. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of the story. Initially, when Amba actually approached Parashurama and told her, because there is a point where Amba goes to Bhishma and tells him, "You need to marry me." He says, "I have taken a vow of celibacy. I can't do this." At a point of time, she went to Parashurama and said, "Your disciple is not agreeing." Parashurama went and ordered Bhishma, "Please marry her." So Bhishma said, "Sorry, I can't." They have a fight. Parashurama was not able to, could not defeat Bhishma in battle, and he tells Amba that, "Amba, sorry, I cannot do this." Apart from that, he was also the guru of Karna. Now, again, this is a story that is known to a lot of people, that when Karna went to him, he learned the Brahmastra and a lot of other astras. When his guru was sleeping in his lap, there was an insect. There's a story that this was Indra. So that insect bit Karna, but afraid of waking up his guru, he did not want to disturb his guru. He kind of bore that. Now, what had happened was he had lied to Parashurama that he was a Brahman, because of this lie. So when Parashurama found out that Karna did not get up, even though that insect was tormenting him in a very bad manner, he understood that you're not a Brahmana. Brahmana cannot take this much pain, and cursed him. This actually plays a very important role in the Mahabharata. Why? Later in the Mahabharata, when Karna faced Arjuna, he wanted to invoke the Brahmastra, but because of Parashurama's curse, He could not remember the mantra associated with the Brahmastra, which he wanted to release on Arjuna. That way, the rishis that we spoke about here play Parashurama again plays a very critical role in the Mahabharata. That way, these are but some of the rishis that we will come upon in the Mahabharata. I'm sure there are many more. So as I started this video saying, this video will be the last in the sub-series Books and Prophets of Hinduism. We will move on to other topics in the forthcoming videos. Once again, very happy Vijayadashami. Navratri greetings to all of you. Namaste. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you.